Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Cindy Gay, and today is Monday, April 20th. Today is question and answer. I don't have anything, a specific lesson planned. I do want to give you a walkthrough on ordering what I call generic wool off of my website because there's been some confusion about how you actually go about doing that. So let's pop over to the website and I will walk you through. I guess we could go back even further. Let's go to Cindy. Yay. Get you back to just my base homepage website so that you know how I got here. Well, one of the easiest ways to get to the wool is going to be click here once you're on my website, do /wool. And it'll get you to the generic wool page where you can order generic. Now, I have tried like crazy to make sure that this is as clear as possible. Now, this monitor that I'm showing this to you on, unfortunately, is sized in such a way that the text is huge, so it's not showing a sidebar. Yours would probably have a sidebar. But what I've done is I've done everything to grab your attention, such as the stop sign. Be sure to read the instructions below, okay? Because if you order something, and I'm going to have to start enforcing it, but if you order a wool from an old video, and old could be yesterday, okay, and I do not have it in stock, I will refund your money, but I'm going to have to do it without the PayPal fees because it's killing me. People are ordering things. I don't have it in stock. I have to refund it, but I still have to pay the PayPal fees. So please, please, please be sure to check to make sure it's in stock. So let's say, for instance, this wool right here. Okay, it's a very popular one. It's one I like to use for primitive sky. This is B031. Okay, so what we want to do before we order it is I want to come all the way down here, past all of this, and I want to go to B031, and I want to see how many I have in stock. So I have 64 yards of that, so I have plenty. I didn't realize the headings didn't stick, so maybe I can figure out how to make the headings stick. So I have 64 yards of that, so I'm okay to order that. So you go back up to where you order, and what you have to do first is choose an option. How much do you want to order, and in what style or shape? Do you want just a strip that's ready for rug hooking? It's a 1/16 of a yard. It's the smallest amount of wool that you can buy from me, and it's great if you want a lot of variety. In fact, you can get in touch with me if you want a collection. Say, I want 2 yards of a good variety of reds. And I'll go through and pull them all off the shelf and rip them all off and label them and put them in a package for you. But you're going to be buying it by the strip, okay, or half yard or 1 yard. Then you add it to your cart. Once you add it to your cart, you can view the cart. My mouse in the right spot. And the issues I had with the shipping like a week or so ago is gone. And I had already put something else in my cart. And this might happen to you at some point where you're shopping and you put something in the cart and then you leave and then you come back later and you put something else in the cart and then all of a sudden you have 2 or 3 of something. If you see that, make sure you check the quantities. And if you don't want it, then click the X and it'll go through that update, okay? If you're just changing quantity, like I want to change it to 2, then click Update Cart. If you don't click that Update Cart, it's not going to change. Then what you can do is, if it has your address on file because you're logged in, which I happen to be, it'll show you the shipping, or you proceed to checkout. And in that checkout, that's where you're actually going to be typing in your name and address. And I have something in here from testing from before. But you would fill in your name and your address. I'm going to be shipping it to the same address. If you have notes, here is where I type in B031. Okay. I want 1 yard of that and 1 yard of your favorite green. I know I misspelled that, but that's okay. I did not check the green for availability, so that could be an issue. But if you're willing to take the chance, you can go ahead and order it. If you can't find it because you don't know the number, you give me a call. Okay. Once you get done with all of that, all your information's here. Your shipping will show up. Tax if you're in the state of Ohio. You can pay right here with your credit card. You can do a check payment if you want. It is going to freeze the order until you write a check and mail it to me. So I will not be pulling it off my shelf until you mail it, until I receive that check. So that could, if it's something that is very popular, that could become an issue. Because other people with credit card payments could come in front of you and buy it out of stock. But if you want to avoid the credit card on a computer, that's the way to do that. And then you would simply place order, and then it would send you emails, and you would go through the whole process that way. Okay? So, in case you are ever wondering, when I hold up a piece of wool and you like it, that's how you go about ordering it. And what I want to do, and I forgot to pull it today, I want to get in the habit of pulling 2 or 3 wools and showing them to you each week so that you can kind of get a feel for what I have in stock and what those wools look like. Okay. So here, Nancy said, I did sculptured daisies on wool many years ago for a purse. Can this be modified for the pencil pouch? Any pattern can be modified for the pencil pouch. It's just a matter of how much detail does it have. Size that it would need to be the size of the pencil pouch. And unfortunately, if you haven't ordered your pencil pouch yet, I'm out of stock. They are gone. I have no idea if I will ever get them back. It's just one of those things that I lucked into. I don't know if I'll be able to luck into it again. So you'll have to just kind of stay tuned and see if it shows up again. Sheila is asking, is your hook-in at 4 p.m. Tuesday? Yes, it's on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The hardest thing is downloading the Zoom app and getting there once. Once you're there, the next time you just remember that link and you just click on that link and then you're where you need to go. What I recommend is that you take the link and copy it to your calendar so that you'll be able to find it each time. I do recommend that you register because if you register and the link changes, I have an email I can send to you. Otherwise, I don't know how to reach you. And that brings us to Deb's question. When hooking ground, any suggestions? And I asked her to elaborate a little bit more on that. And she said greens and not too much underbrush. Well, that wasn't quite what I was looking for, but I guess this is going to be a question. Diana had a question down here. I think it was Diana. Where did that go? Here we go. What wool to use for a moon? So even though a moon and ground don't seem like they have anything in common, let me address them both the same way. What's important is that you look at, well, let me back up. This is when you are hooking something that you want it to look realistic, okay? If you're hooking primitive or you're hooking something, with purple ground, none of this matters, right? We're hooking realistic here. When you're hooking realistic, you've got something to copy. It's one of the easiest things to do, but it seems to really stump rug hookers. You need to really, really look at what you're hooking. I'm looking out my window, and there's across the street is a field, and it's part of it's wet because it had been flooded when it rained really hard a few days ago. So that's a darker brown. And then the other part is a really, really light gray brown because it's all kind of dried out, but it's got a little bit of green in it. All of a sudden, I know exactly there's 2 different wools that I would pull from my stash that I would use to hook that, because I know that's what it's going to look like. Now, how do I know that that's what it's going to look like? Well, what you need to do is a texture sampler, right? So a texture sampler, there should be one in here. Here's one. This is a texture sampler. If you're a member of my color planning course, there's a whole lesson on this along with a pattern with suggested dimensions and what size to do them. And it's simply a hooked area and then a piece of flat wool. Okay, so now I can look at that field, and then I can look at this, and I can go, okay, this one here is interesting. Might be a little bit too warm because it's more grayed out. So even though I think of this wool as yellow, this actually looks a lot like what's going on out there. This might be good for the darker areas, although that is a little too dark. The 2 wools I'm thinking of, I don't see. This was one of them. This was the one I was thinking of for the light dirt area. That would make a very realistic light farm field area where it's got little sticks and plants that are starting to come up, but not a full planting, not a full growth. That's what that would be. And that's the exercise that I would take with that, is look. Now, when you're hooking a moon, you're not just hooking the moon, you're hooking the sky around the moon and the sky. And if you really, really look, the sky next to the moon is a different color than the rest of the sky, right? So if you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure you observe it. If for some reason you want to hook it tonight before the sun goes down, then Google it. Okay, there's tons of pictures on Google. You can't take an image from Google and trace it and hook it because you're stealing that photograph. That's a copyright infringement. But to see what a moon looks like at night with the glow of the sky, there's nothing wrong with using that as a reference for what you're doing. It's all about seeing. It's the same thing when you hook pine trees. We know pine trees have a stem or trunk that goes up the center, right? But when you look at it, do you really, really see that trunk? No. The only thing you don't see is you never, ever, ever see sky in the area where the trunk is, right? And I've seen some rug hooking with sky in the area where the trunk is. So really observe, really, really look, study it, become an observer. I use this practice when I'm in the car. I'll turn the radio off, particularly when I used to drive to workshops on my own. I never turn the lights on. The sun went down a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's dark in here. But get into the practice of just looking and thinking, what would I hook that with? What would that wool need to look like? Would it be a texture or a solid? Rarely do I use a solid. I like my textures. Is it one color, or is it really a couple of different colors? Is it a couple of different values? What direction should I hook it? Is there an obvious direction? Like way across the field, there's a stand of a bunch of skinny little trees. They're all just huddled along the river. Obviously, you wouldn't hook the trees this way, right? You'd hook them up and down, because even though you might not be able to hook everything that's over there as a full-blown tree, you're going to be hooking the impression of those trees. And it's going to be important that the sky that pokes through them looks vertical, okay? Because you want those trees to look vertical. The ground, to me, clearly looks like it needs to be hooked horizontal. And when in doubt, get on the internet and watch some paintings of some painters painting. The old Bob Ross ones will work, right? Especially if you're having a bad day. You paint the ground. They paint the ground sideways. They paint the sky sideways. They don't paint it up and down. So don't hook it up and down, right? Painting has been done for centuries, and they've always done it the same way. Just learn to really, really look. We know tree trunks are brown, but are they? Okay. I challenge you that. If that's the one thing this season, and right now it's easy because the leaves aren't there to distract you. Look at tree trunks and be truly, truly honest. What color is that tree trunk? And don't walk up to it and look at it like this, because that's, unless you're hooking a tree trunk on your rug that's this big, okay? You stand the distance that you would be away from it on your rug and look at it. What color is that really? Is that brown or is it more gray? What color is that? What color is the shadow that it makes? Shadows tend toward a slight purple tint. It's certainly not super purple, and I don't have anything handy that is super purple, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So observe, observe, observe. That's the big lesson, I guess, for today. Sonia is saying, do you still dye and sell your birch tree wool? Well, we will as soon as we can figure it out again. Something's changed, and we have not been able to reproduce it to my satisfaction where I'm willing to put my name on it. So right now, no. But when I do, I will let you know. Any suggestions for yellows, dye formulas, buttercup yellow? Well, you can check out the yellows that are in my dye book. If you're in my virtual dye class, those formulas are inside that virtual dye class. Yellows are tough. Yellows are not so much tough to dye, they're tough to use. What I would suggest first is figure out what kind of yellow is easy to use, and then find that dye formula, okay? Rather than finding dye formulas and then trying to figure out if that's easy to use or not, because yellows can be really, really tricky to use in a piece. Liz is asking, when should a topic or pattern be outlined? I'm guessing you mean, when should a motif or a pattern or an element be outlined? I'm assuming that's what you're asking. And that's going to depend on your design aesthetic. If you're hooking realistic, if it ain't outlined in nature, don't outline it, okay? If you're hooking primitive, that's a whole nother ballgame. You could be hooking children's art, and children's art is often reminiscent of coloring books, and they always have a dark line, right? Because the dark line's there, and then they color it. It just depends. And what do you consider an outline? Is an outline something different than the wool you're going to use for filling, or sometimes you outline with the same wool that you use for filling, but is that truly an outline? Not really. So there's two kinds of things here. There's like color, and then there's like direction of hooking. But I guess the answer is I don't always outline. It depends on what it is I'm hooking. Realistic stuff, as a general rule of thumb, is almost never outlined. Primitive, anything else, it just depends on what it is. So Deborah is recommending for, I'm guessing, a dye formula is ProChem 199 with a little 119. 2 different yellows. I teach a method where I use the basic 5s. So I wouldn't, students who are following me would not necessarily have 2 yellows. But you can always take yellow and temper it with tiny bits of things. But again, I would try to figure out what kind of yellows you like to use first, and then figure out what formula. Sonia is saying, do you have to have special measuring spoons? Yes, if you're out there in the wild, because a lot of formulas will say that you need 1/128th of a teaspoon, okay, which is a half, then a quarter, then an eighth, then a 16th, then a 32nd, then a 64th, then a 1/128th, okay? But there is a way to get around that, and I teach that in my virtual dye class. And all you need for that is a quarter of a teaspoon. Okay, so any ordinary kitchen dye spoons will work for that, and you'll be able to measure out any formula that you can find in any of your dye books. You just need a handy dandy little chart next to you to keep it straight. When whipping a forward finish on a mat, does the back of the whipping have to cover all the rug warp? Oh, Beverly, you got me stumped on that one. I'm not sure if I know what you mean. Let me get a rug. This one, I think, is one you can, well, not really. See, normally you can't really see the back. So does it cover all the whipping? Yes, but that's because where you stick the needle is down there between the bundle that you're doing and this, and it's going out and through. So I don't know how you would do it without covering all of it, unless you don't have it prepped properly. That would probably be the only time. And all I can say is, reread those instructions. There's pictures for them. There's a video inside the course in the rug hooking journey in the basics. I think there's a video there. I'll have to double check on that. Because I did a video recently and I intended to post it there. And I'm not sure if I did now. There's too much going on. So, but the instructions in the wild are at cindygayrughooking.com/FF for fold forward. And it's a long post, but it gets pictures and it gets you through there, but there's no video there. Nancy says, what size is the pencil pouch? My daisies are like 10 by 10 inches. Well, clearly the pencil pouch is smaller than that. And just measure the pencil pouch that you have. They're all roughly, by, this one's a small one. The other ones are a little bit bigger, but again, I have no more left for sale. And I don't know when I'll be able to get more of them. Looking for question marks. There we go. Erlene says, I have a friend that was wondering how to hook a round rug without it bunching up. The best bet, I did a whole Friday lesson and I documented the daylights out of it inside the rug hooking journey. And that was relatively recently. So I would recommend that. There's so much, Earlene. It would take another hour or so to explain all of that. There's a lot of steps that you do before you start hooking, or at least that I recommend that you do before you start hooking when you're hooking a round rug, that you should do. There's no one simple answer, I'm afraid. Nancy says, afraid the wool would not be stable enough foundation also to connect to the pencil pouch. So this is probably about your daisies. I don't know how they're made, Nancy, so I guess I'm at a loss. When you are making the pencil pouch, you're literally just attaching it. So there's nothing that is structural about that, as long as it stays there without falling off. And I just do like big 1/2-inch stitches through this little cloth edging that's on there to hold it down. It's not hard. Looking for question marks. If you pick strip, how much yardage is that? And means already cut. No, it does not mean already cut, but cut on your own. All you need is a little pair of scissors. If you don't have one like this is my favorite, by the way, and I like it because it fits my fingers. Okay, these work. These are what? Super cheapies. Okay, there's nothing wrong with these. Okay, you can cut by hand. I have several articles on how to hand cut. I have a podcast on how to hand cut, and I think there's even a YouTube video on how to hand cut. So go find those. And the strip is a 1/16 of a yard. So 4/16 would equal a 1/4 yard. Okay. And Carol is asking, what is generic wool? Generic wool means wool. It was just when I had all the wool listed individually, I created something called generic wool. So if you heard me talk about it on a video, people could still order it because it takes hours for me to list just one wool on the website. And when we buy these wools, we have them for such a short time and then they sell out, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So what I'm doing now is, that's just what I call it. That's something I made up out of the blue. Susan is saying, you spoke about a dyed black background fabric by the yard, an ivory dyed background fabric by the yard. Where do I find these on your website? If I talked about dyed background, that would be these, which are called antique background, and that is listed separately on my site. This is what I would consider a black bundle. And then this is best beige background. It's really not by the yard per se, but you get 1.5 yards in a bundle like this. It comes with a recipe on the front on how to cook it to make them blend, so that it makes a really nice background. And those are listed separately. So when you go to my store and you click wool, you're going to see antique background and you're going to see best beige background. Sharon's asking, on texture sampler, would you cut wool both ways if possible to see how it would hook? Sure, you can. I'm assuming you're talking about stripes, because that's really the only wool. Well, unless your plaid is not symmetrical. Most rug hooking plaids tend to be symmetrical. That means if you cut it this way or if you cut it this way, you're going to get exactly the same thing. Okay, so cut it the way it should be, which is in parallel to the selvage, right? Stripes, I can tell you right now, if you cut it across the stripes so that you have little tiny lines on all your strips, you're going to end up with almost a solid, because there's so much there that it's going to blend together, and you're going to lose the individual quality of the stripe. When you cut along the stripe, meaning every strip is a different color, then you've got something that's a little bit more interesting. That's the method I prefer to cut. But if you're unsure, cut it both ways, sure. I'm looking for question marks. If you didn't put question marks in it, I cannot find your question. What makes yellows difficult to use? They jump at you. They're attention grabbers. The one yellow, okay, so this yellow is my absolute favorite yellow. This yellow, everybody can use in almost any rug, and it'll work. You can put it in centers of flowers, you can use it as a background, you can do it however. This one, much brighter, still a really nice wool, and a little bit dull compared to what a dyed yellow would be, because the dyed yellows tend to be very harsh. Because it has this modeling with the natural in the checker part, this is going to be a little bit easier to use than a solid, but this is going to jump. And what's going to happen is that you're going to hook it, and then you're going to look at it, and you're going to go, oh, and you're going to rip it out. And then you're not going to put yellow in your rug. That's just what happens over and over and over and over. And I challenge you, go to a rug hooking exhibit or just Google some rugs online and look for yellow. Who's using yellow? How are they using? What kinds of yellow are they using? Yellow can be really, really difficult. So Kim says, buttercup yellow. With magic carpet, I like to use yellow and chocolate brown. Whatever measure of yellow you use 1/10 the amount of chocolate brown. And the brown's going to temper it, so it's not, quite so intense. Again, I'm looking for questions. I cannot read every comment, so if you didn't put question mark in there, you'll have to ask again. Norma said, you said that the edge on the Pemberville rug was a Michigan edge, my name for it, but I'd never heard the term. That's why. Can you explain what it is? I'm going to do that this Friday in the formal lesson on finishes. I'm going to do a survey of finishes, not necessarily how to do them, but here's a bunch of different kinds of finishes, okay, and why they're good and why they're bad. So stay tuned for that on Friday. Erlene says, sorry meant whipping, not hooking around rug. Well, it still starts in the beginning before you get hooking. But yeah, I covered that recently. It's in the rug hooking journey. I think it was February, maybe. I'm doing that from question marks. Linda said, forgot the questions. I can't go back and find your name, so you're going to have to ask it again. What are the names and numbers of the yellow wool you showed us? Okay, this one is Y002. And I have a lot of this wool. This one, I don't know. This might be my only yard. I don't know. You have to check the inventory list. Y022. Cleom is asking, what is a good color for a dirt road? Depends on the dirt road. What part of the country is it in? Okay, if you're some places out west, it's going to be orange. If you're here, it's going to be more like a gray-brown. So it depends what color is your dirt road, and it's probably not just one color. One of the things, and when you're doing a dirt road, I'm assuming you're not doing just a little tiny section of it. It's maybe a road that maybe travels off for ways. And what you'll have to do is observe. How does the color and the value of that road change as it moves further and further away from you? As a general rule of thumb, when things get further away, they get duller, right? And they get more dim, meaning the color's not as intense, and it dulls down and it becomes more gray. Where when you see like a really, really far distant tree line, even though you know they're the same trees that are right there next to the driveway, they look like they're a completely different color. And that's because there's all that atmosphere between you and it. So it depends. It depends on what color is your dirt road, what color is your dirt. Okay, because different parts of the country have different colored dirt. Um, I know I frustrated a rug cooker once at a workshop when she asked, I need concrete colored. Well, what color is your concrete? Different parts of the country have slightly different colors of concrete. It depends on what they have for raw ingredients. So you need to observe and look. And there are certain things, like I have, the B031 for the primitive sky. That's one I can recommend for primitive sky. G052 is primitive ground. That works. But the primitive, once we're talking realistic, now you've got to look at what you've actually got and figure out what color that needs to be. It's not always going to be a something I can just offer up and say, here you go. Okay. I've had people call me and ask for pumpkin wool. Well, there are white pumpkins, there are green pumpkins, there's all different kinds of orange. Are you hooking primitive? Are you hooking realistic? Do you want a solid? Do you want a texture? Do you want it dark? Do you want it light? There's a lot more involved in that. Then once you get that figured out, what are the rest of the wools in your rug? If I recommend a wool that's super bright orange because the last pumpkin I bought was that exact color, it's not going to work if you're doing a dusty antique. Okay, so there's no such thing as a perfect for everything wool. Got it? Okay. I'm at the end of the questions. If I did not answer your question, it could be either A, I missed it because I couldn't see it, or it didn't have question marks in front of it. So I can't find your question if there's no question mark in front of it. Here's one from Sharon. She says, any suggestions of where to get labels? I don't have an inkjet. Okay, but chances are, you a member of a rug cooking group? There's bound to be somebody that if you said, here's 2 sheets of the printable fabric, keep one for yourself and print my image, and you send it to them in an email, they would do that for you. Okay. You can print at the library. Of course, now they're all closed, but there's other ways around that. Yeah, you're just going to have to get a helping friend. You can get labels that you can just take a piece of fabric and fabric markers and write it all out yourself. I don't personally like a handwritten rug label. I like mine designed. I like my certain design around the outside. I like to put a lot of information. I don't think I could write that small, so I don't want a huge label, right? So there are some that you can buy like at quilt shops that are like cutesy little ones and then fill in the blanks. You could do that. That would be better than nothing. But yeah, I would see if you can just get a little help. Get a little help from somebody. As long as you provide the paper, because that's the expensive part, is that the printable fabric, and you buy those in a little pouch. I would think, even if you have family out of town, get on Amazon, order that fabric to be shipped to them, email them the file, they'll print it out, stick it in an envelope, mail it back to you. Done. Taken care of. So that's what I would do. It looks so nice. And it can be anything you want. You can put a picture on it. I did one recently. I repaired an oriental rug of a friend who had passed away, and I repaired it for her husband, who was going to be giving it to his daughter as a Christmas present. And they found a really nice picture of her and her mother. And I put that on the back, hooked with love by Pat, blah, blah, and, the year, because I found the year actually hooked in her rug. So I put the year on the label. Those kinds of things. I like to put the designer, I like to put the name of the pattern. The fact that it's 100% wool hooked on linen or hooked on rug warp. I hooked this pattern because my husband's a hunter and he would go hunting every single year and load his pockets up with ho-hos and ding-dongs and Twinkies and sit in the woods until lunchtime, but never came home with a deer. Okay? This is a man who can shoot a chicken egg at 200 yards. Okay, you can't even see that chicken egg at 200 yards. You have to look through a scope to see it, and he can shoot that. So it's not because he wasn't an accurate shooter. He just wasn't a hunter at heart. He's more of a target shooter, right? So I did the rug. You can kind of see part of it up. Oh, no, you can't because my light's in the way, and I can't move that light. Do I have? No, I don't have that one loaded as an image. It's called No Deer This Year. And it's, if you do No Deer This Year, Cindy Gay, it'll probably show up. And I hooked my husband, leaned up against the rug with his arms crossed and the gun up against the tree, and he's sound asleep. And there's the deer talking to the crow in the tree. That rug means so much more because that story's there. And the reason I knew what was going on is that my daughter was like 10 years old or something and wanted to go with him. And he said, okay. But the aunt the night before was telling all the boys who were staying in the bunkhouse, keep your garbage, don't be stupid, the bears are out, keep everything locked up, cleaned up, blah, blah, blah. And that's all she heard. There are bears, there are bears, there are bears. So here she is up in the woods, crack of dawn, and her dad sound asleep. And she came back and she gave us an earful. Still looking for question marks. Okay. I don't see any other question marks. So that's it for today, everybody. Thank you for being here. I don't have a topic for tomorrow. What I'll do is I'll go back and I'll read all these comments. Maybe I'll find tomorrow's topic in that. If not, inside the dashboard, there is a place where you can suggest a topic, and I'll be looking at that list, and we'll see what's going on there. Friday's topic is going to be a survey of finishes. Not how to do them, but the pros and cons of different kinds of finishes. And then we'll branch off and cover one by one over the next several months or so. Okay? That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. The hook ends tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I hope you'll be there. You need to register. It'll automatically, once you type in your name and your email address, it'll automatically send you an email. And that is the link in how to get into that room. You don't need a password because it's included in the link. So make sure you do that. Okay? That's it, everybody. Bye for now.